This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Dole Food Company, the world's leading producer and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. I want to take a moment to welcome veterans and active members of our armed forces who are joining us from remote locations over the internet today. And I also want to welcome new listeners on new affiliates in California, Texas, Ohio, Florida, and from coast to coast in all 50 states. Thank you for making us part of your news week. During the next hour, we're going to tackle a subject you can expect to hear a lot more about from the presidential candidates, and that is the topic of cyber warfare. Today, we're fortunate to have with us Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author Fred Kaplan, whose latest book, titled Dark Territory: The Secret History of Cyber War, presents an eye-opening account of cyber attacks on the U.S. and reveals how vulnerable governments and businesses really are. But before Mr. Kaplan joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Fred M. Kaplan was born in Hutchinson, Kansas. He received his undergraduate and master's degrees from Oberlin College and his Ph.D. from MIT. Though he fully intended on studying literature in college, he found himself fascinated by the live televised Watergate hearings, which he was glued to every day, which caused Kaplan to switch his major to political science and later international relations. I want to mention that while at MIT, Kaplan focused on nuclear strategy, arms control, and military force planning, studies which prepared him for the kind of books he would write much later in his career. Between 1978 and 80, Kaplan became a policy advisor to U.S. Representative Les Alpin in Washington, D.C., and shortly after leaving that post, Kaplan wrote the best-selling book, The Wizards of Armageddon, where his love of literature and interest in military strategy came together. He was soon offered a position with the Boston Globe, where Kaplan wrote for 20 years. Following the Globe, Kaplan joined Slate as their war stories columnist. Kaplan is one of the nation's most respected authors when it comes to connecting military and political dots in a way that makes for compelling and often disturbing narrative. His latest book on cyber war follows in that tradition. So hang on to your hats, folks, because we're in for a bumpy ride ahead. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Mr. Fred Kaplan. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Kaplan.
Thank you. To ward off charges of fraud, I would just correct one small thing in your otherwise very nice summation of my career. The bachelor's was from Oberlin, both the master's and PhD from MIT. Oberlin doesn't offer master's degrees. So other than that, all well. Let's go.
Well, thank you for that correction. I'm glad that you made that point. I really have had a long, outstanding relationship with the staff at MIT, and they'll be happy that we got that right. Now, before we get to your book, there is a story currently breaking about a Romanian hacker who was extradited to the U.S., who claims to have hacked Mrs. Clinton's home server more than once using simple online toolkits. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment on that breaking story.
Yeah, I saw that. It's nothing new. Excuse me. It's already been reported that the Russian government hacked into Secretary Clinton's private email. Now, it's also been reported that they didn't get anything out of it. They attempted to do what are called phishing expeditions. I mean, you probably get these all the time. I certainly do, where, there's an email and it invites you to click on something that looks a little bit alluring, at which point you will download malware that will mess your system up. Here's what is known. Her email did receive some of these phishing expeditions, and they traced the logs to Russian sites, but she did not click on any of them. So I've seen these reports as well, and they've been played up as something huge, but it's nothing at all new. It was widely assumed and even reported that hackers had tried to get into system, whether anything was terribly important in there, much less whether anybody got into them, is something that hasn't been proved at all.
Well, the latest report is that he claims he first got into Sidney Blumenthal's AOL account, and from there he had a roadmap that got him into Clinton's server.
Well, I mean, this is how it is an interesting thing. This is how you get into systems. Often, if you want to get into somebody's email, and by the way, that could just as easily have been her State Department email as well, you hack into the email of somebody who communicates with that person or with that organization. I will say this. I mean, I know Sidney Blumenthal. He doesn't have an AOL account, or he used to, but he has a Gmail account now, so I don't even know how accurate these reports are.
Okay, so we don't really know if this fellow was able to get into Clinton's email account or not, but we can assume that if not him, we can assume others were able to access the account. I
would say this, my story, it goes all the way back to the very beginning of the Internet. It was the precursor of the Internet called the ARPANET. This was in 1967. And the idea behind it was very good. I mean, it would give scientists, especially in the defense community, ways that they could communicate with one another and exchange data. They wouldn't have to have separate consoles for each university that they were communicating with. But there was a computer scientist named Willis Ware. He was the director of the computer science department at the RAND Corporation. He'd worked with John von Neumann on the very first electronic computers in the United States. He was on the scientific advisory board of the National Security Agency. And he wrote a paper. It was secret at the time, but it's been declassified since. It's a fascinating document where he warns. He says, the problem with putting information on a network where it can be accessed online from remote, unsecured locations is that you're creating inherent vulnerabilities. You're not going to be able to keep secrets anymore. And when I was doing the research for this book, I asked the guy who was running the ARPANET program at the time if he'd read Willis Ware's paper. And he said, yeah, I knew Willis. And I said, well, what'd you think? And he goes, well, I took it to my team. And they read it, and they said, oh, don't saddle us with a security requirement. Look how hard it was just to do what we've done. It's like telling the Wright brothers that their first plane has to carry 20 passengers 50 miles. Let's just do this one step at a time, and besides, it'll take decades for the Russians to do anything like this. And, well, it did take decades. It took 2.5 or 3 decades, by which time whole systems and networks had grown up with no provision for security, whatever. So I see this as sort of the bitten apple in the digital Garden of Eden. It was there from the very beginning. And years later, Willis Ware would tell people, he would say, here's the thing. The only computer that's completely secure is a computer that no one can use. So vulnerability is an inherent part of the system, and the dangerous thing is that so much in our lives is hooked up to these computer networks, and not just our computers and our banking systems and our dams and electrical grids and waterworks, and now even with the Internet of Things in our house and our cars, and it is all imminently hackable.
Yes, well, it's certainly not the distributed system that we think of. At some point, it's all connected to the Internet. So once you get control of the Internet, you control all of it.
That's right. I mean, there are encrypted things, and those are harder to get into. What I tell people is that, look, I mean, if what you're worried about is, somebody breaking into your banking account or to get your Netflix password or something.
Mr. Kaplan, I'm sorry. We have to go to a hard break, but we'll come back in just a moment and we can finish that thought. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Imagine hearing the words, "Your child has cancer." The emotional impact is staggering. They tell you that treatment may last for years, and you travel the long road between hospital and home. Your financial worries multiply, and you want to stay strong for everyone, especially your child. But nobody understands. Your friends and family don't get it. Where do you turn? For the last 18 years, Jacob's Heart has provided essential support to families enduring the unimaginable. We have been there from the time of diagnosis all the way through the course of treatment, regardless of the outcome. With no government funding and no reimbursement for services, Jacob's Heart relies 100% on support from our community to make miracles happen for families. Please support Jacob's Heart by going to our website, jacobsheart.org, or call us at 831-724-9100. Make a difference in the life of a child. Thank you.
Caraccioli Cellars recently celebrated the 5th anniversary of their tasting room. This is what Enophiles had to say.
Anna Russell. I love Caraccioli wine because I love the Santa Lucia Highlands, and I think this is a particularly great representation of what SLH can do that's different, using the most common grapes, Pinot and Chardonnay, and making something really beautiful and different for the area. I love the wine, so I always come back to almost every one of their events.
My name is Jenny Franklin. I like it because it's very flavorful. It just is a good Pinot. Goes down without touching any sides. It's very good.
Cole Lovelace. I really like the Brut Rosé. I like the older varietals too. I think it's just the way they manufacture it, the way that they produce it is old world style, and I enjoy that.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caraccioliCellars.com, or reach us by phone at 831-622-7722.
Spring is in the air, and that means it's time for...
What, allergies? Easter bunnies?
No, Charlie, it's time for electrical safety.
Of course. Hello, Charlie Friedman here with Chris Jensen from JM Electric. Spring is the season for safety.
That's right, Charlie. Every year, thousands are injured or killed by electricity around the home. But thankfully, we now have incredible technologies today, like arc fault circuit interrupters and tamper-resistant receptacles that can protect you from those electrical fires and shocks. JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if any of these devices or our current safe testing services are a good fit for their home.
Don't get a free tap dancing lesson from your electrical circuitry. Give my friends at JM Electric a call. They'll come to your home, have an expert look at your electrical systems, and tell you what can be done to make your home safe, just like they did for my home, and their visit won't cost you a dime. Give JM Electric a call at 422-7819 or visit jmelectric.com or on Facebook and tell them Charlie sent you.
So you finally decided to start taking a vitamin supplement. Those chewables and tablets are fine if you don't mind paying for something that is only absorbed about 4 to 6%. However, a liquid supplement can have a 90% absorption rate if you choose the right one. Youngevity offers a wide variety of liquid supplements with a 90% absorption rate or more. Beyond Tangy Tangerine may be the best one ever invented. It starts as a liquid, then is freeze-dried like those instant coffees into a crystal. Then all you have to do is add a couple of scoops to water. No refrigeration, no fuss, no mess. Not only do you get a complete multiple vitamin, Beyond Tangy Tangerine also has minerals, and it tastes fantastic. You'll want to drink it all day long. So the next time you reach for a vitamin supplement, reach for Beyond Tangy Tangerine from Youngevity. For more information or to order, call Andy or Phyllis Anderson at 888-245-0300.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Fred Kaplan, who has a new book out titled Dark Territory, The Secret History of Cyber War. And I'm sorry we had to go to hard break there, but I wanted to give you a chance to finish your thoughts there.
Yeah, just the main point is if you're just an ordinary person, there are things you can do to protect your computer. But if you have something that somebody really wants, and especially if that person is really good or has the resources of a nation state, there's really very little you can do about it. That's the main point.
Now, after reading your book, I felt it was very difficult to do justice to the amount of research you put into this book. And So I thought maybe a good place to start would be to ask you to explain what we mean when we say cyber war, in particular, why we refer to it as a war.
Right. Well, it concerns the ability of a nation state or some faction aspiring to be a nation state to attack the computer networks of an opponent or an enemy. And as we were talking, the computer networks are now governing everything: the military, the command control networks of a government resources, critical infrastructure that can be threatened or destroyed as leverage in the pursuit of a war. And as I say, it has been known that this is possible for more than 50 years. And as I document in the book, it's things that everybody's been doing to everybody else, or that some countries have been doing to other countries for at least the last 30 years. And one point that I make that needs to be emphasized is that it's not just other countries doing it to us. We've been doing this to other countries for a very long time.
Now, there are still people who do not believe that these cyber attacks are funded and orchestrated by the governments of China, North Korea, Russia, and others. So I thought maybe you could walk us through the attack on Sony by the North Koreans and exactly how the U.S. government knew without any doubt that this came from a team called Dark Seoul in Korea.
Right. Well, yeah, you're right. With the Korean attack, especially on Sony, a lot of people at the beginning said, including some rather renowned computer experts, said, I don't think this was North Korea. This looks more like an inside job. But I found out the way that we knew that this was North Korea. And I was struck even at the time that the FBI came out and said with very high confidence that this was an attack from North Korea. And they usually don't talk like that, is that we have been hacking so deeply into North Korea's computer network. We don't monitor it in real time, so it's not like anybody saw this attack on Sony going on when it was going on. But the NSA could go back into the files, and they could watch on their monitors what the North Korean hackers were seeing on their monitors when they were doing the attack. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's like, catching them. It's like having a camera in a bank where you can see the people robbing the bank very clearly, and you can tell who they are. So in that case in particular, there's no doubt whatsoever.
Right. It was like rewinding video.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm. Now, there have been other cyber attacks on retailers, defense contractors, utility companies, and so on. But in the eyes of the Obama administration, the attack on Sony, because of their comedy called The Interview, which mocked the North Korean leadership, was an attack on free speech. So in this particular case, the U.S. government felt that a proportional response was necessary. Tell us about that response.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, there had been lots of hacks before of, banks, defense establishments, defense industries. This was the one, because it does touch on our values, free speech and so forth, that he felt it necessary to say that, yeah, we are going to respond. We are going to retaliate. Now, by coincidence, about a week later, North Korea's internet was unplugged for like 10 hours. And the North Koreans assumed that was Obama's retaliation. I've been told that it absolutely was not. This was done by probably some group like Anonymous. It was a different hacking group entirely. The retaliation that Obama did was a stiffening of our sanctions against North Korea. But think about it. Let's say that this was done against a somewhat more resilient power that had much better cyber capabilities. And something like that happened. They thought that we had turned off their internet in retaliation to some attack that they didn't consider a terribly serious attack. Well, they might respond to our shutting down their internet by shutting down something of ours, and then we could be escalating into a real war. Fortunately, even if it had been the case that we'd shut down North Korea's internet, there really isn't a whole lot that North Korea could do about it. But another country, Russia, China, Syria, Iraq. The title of my book, Dark Territory, it comes from something that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates told his associates after getting briefed every day by the hundreds of hacks that were attempted. He said, we're wandering in dark territory here. There are no rules of the road. There are no rules of the game. There's no hotline to call. There's no Geneva Convention. Nobody quite knows what is considered an acceptable hack versus a truly dangerous attack, and then what happens if there's retaliation. We're driving blind on this, and it's something that's kind of appalling, and that could be very dangerous if something got out of hand in the very near future.
It's interesting that our retaliation tends to be economic, not electronic. The United States government clearly denied they had anything to do with the 10 hours of lost internet of the country of North Korea. But similarly, when we discovered that the Chinese government was funding hacking into U.S. businesses and the U.S. government, when Obama went over to China, he kind of issued a very mild and veiled threat. In your book, you mentioned that he said, well, we would hate for our trade to be interrupted by these cyber threats. And that was sort of a face-saving way in which the Chinese could say, oh, you're on to us, and, we should back down since we don't want to have an economic consequence.
Right. Well, the other thing is it's all a little awkward because, and there were people in the Defense Department who were a little disturbed when President Obama started making a public objection to Chinese hacking, and that is that, we've been hacking into them for quite a long time, too. Now, we don't do the same kind of hacking. We don't hack into, we don't steal Chinese trade secrets because we don't need to. We're ahead of them in these things. They've stolen our trade secrets. We don't need their aircraft design. But, we hack into their military networks. We hack into their critical infrastructure, just like they hack into ours. And in fact, when it was revealed that the Chinese had hacked into, the millions of personnel records, federal personnel records, well, maybe we can talk about this when
right. Well, we've got to take another scheduled break, but we'll pick this up on the other side of the break. We'll return after these brief messages from today's sponsors. You're listening to the Costa Report. If you're wondering what to do with all that data you're creating, do I have an offer for you? Tableau is drag-and-drop software that people of any skill level can use to analyze and turn data into something actionable. That's right, I said actionable. And isn't that what all that data is for? With Tableau, you can connect to any data in virtually any format and visualize it on the fly. Databases, spreadsheets, even big data sources are instantly combined into usable charts, graphs, reports, and dashboards. People can analyze data and drag and drop at 10 times the speed of a traditional business intelligence system. But the most impressive thing about Tableau is that anyone can use it. And just to prove the point, you can get a free 14-day trial from Tableau just by mentioning you heard this ad. But do it now, because this offer won't last. For your free 14-day trial, visit Tableau at tableau.com/Costa. That's tableau.com/Costa. Tableau software. What's your data trying to tell you?
Run, run, run as fast as you can from coastal Aptos through the redwoods, up the mountain to the sky. Get up and run. 31st Annual Santa Cruz Lions Nicene Marks Marathon, Half Marathon, or 5K. Saturday, June 4th, Aptos Village Park. All proceeds from your run go to help the seeing impaired see, the hearing impaired hear, and the young grow into productive citizens. Register to run today at NiceneMarksMarathon.com. That's NiceneMarksMarathon.com. Run as fast as you can.
Every day, millions of seniors struggle with cancer, arthritis, and other rare diseases. They rely on Medicare Part B for access to their doctor and life-saving medicines. Shockingly, the Obama administration has proposed a misguided experiment to Medicare, and it could be devastating. Government bureaucrats could manipulate your course of treatment. Access to new breakthrough treatments may be restricted. Local clinics could be forced to close, requiring some patients to travel significant distance and forcing others into hospitals for their care. Over 300 patient and provider groups have called on Congress to stop this experiment, and Congress needs to listen. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo has always protected California seniors. Call Congresswoman Eshoo at 202-225-8104 or go to stopcmscuts.com. Urge her to stand up for California seniors and stop the Medicare Part B experiment. Paid for by the Community Oncology Alliance.
Coast Paper and Supply has been family-owned and operated since 1948. They have a wide array of products available, including brand name and eco-friendly cleaning supplies, paper goods, and compostable plates, cups, and cutlery. Whether your needs are for business or home, Coast Paper and Supply's friendly and reliable staff have what you're looking for. They even accommodate special orders. You can find them at 151 Josephine on River Street in Santa Cruz, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30, or call at 831-423-3350. Coast Paper and Supply is a proud member of Think Local First.
As a newly minted citizen of the United States, Rosemary Chalmers is required to have a basic knowledge of baseball.
Every day now, Rick and Thomas are giving me baseball information.
Yeah, you know, what I like about what Thomas is doing, it's a very dynamic classroom setting for you. We're having definitions thrown at you from realities in the previous day's game.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
So today you learned about fielder's choice.
Yes, and whether that's a run or not.
Well,
whether it's an out or not. Am I correct? Yes.
Well, you're warm. I don't know if you're getting hot or cold, though.
Oh, Rosie, it looks like you're cold. But keep up the good work. Seems your baseball knowledge is equal to my grasp of cricket. Keep up with Rosie's progress on Good Morning Monterey Bay, weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. on KSCO.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is Fred Kaplan, and we're talking about his riveting new book titled Dark Territory, The Secret History of Cyber War. Now, did you want to continue your thoughts? I hate that we have these hard breaks. I'm so sorry, but we've got to take them.
I should anticipate. Yeah, but when the news came out about the Chinese hacking of the millions of records of federal employees, and General Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, was asked about this at a congressional hearing. He was asked about this Chinese cyber attack, and he said, well, I don't know if this is really an attack. It's more an act of espionage, similar to the kinds of things that we do as well.
Well, you've pointed out in your book that these acts of espionage go back to Roman and Egyptian empire times. You know, we've always had eyes on the opposing team. This is just a little bit different, though.
Well, it's a lot different because, even back in mid-century or even toward the end of the 20th century, the NSA would tap phones or intercept radio signals and that sort of thing. But what's happened now with the Internet and the pervasiveness of computer networks is that it's impossible just to tap one cell phone. You get into the whole network. You get into everybody's stuff. And also all of our stuff is now vulnerable to the same kinds of attacks when everything is plugged into computer networks. You know, for example, the Stuxnet attack, the joint U.S.-Israeli operation which sabotaged centrifuges in Iranian nuclear reactors or nuclear uranium enrichment plants. What that was, it wasn't an attack on the centrifuges directly. It was an attack on the computer system that was controlling the speed at which the centrifuges were spinning.
Yes.
So, you can do similar things with electrical power grids, with the flow of water in and out of dams. I mean, take your pick. It's all we've sort of opened up the door on this one.
But even our own personal computers, we learned from Edward Snowden that the NSA was using some pretty out-of-the-world technologies to collect data. And they had some funny names like Howler Monkey, Rage Master, Loud Auto, Monkey Calendar. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, there's an outfit within the NSA called the Tailored Access Operations Office. This is sort of the black bag job of the digital realm. The CIA has divisions where if you want to go steal a document, these are the guys who go crack the safe. Well, the TAO are the people in the NSA. They're the elite hackers who figure out how to, you say, I want to get into Osama bin Laden's email. They're the ones who figure out to do it. And they've devised technologies that can, for example, activate the microphone or the camera in a laptop remotely without even turning on the light, showing you that the camera is on, that can intercept signals off the screen, for example, in case or even from radio signals, so that in case the computer isn't plugged into the internet, you can still intercept the signals. There's really very little that they can't get to if they want to. Now, I should say one thing just as a cautionary statement. It's not like they're doing this to you and me. One thing that I learned, and I was kind of surprised by this, is that the NSA is just chock full of lawyers. And there are laws about this thing, and they take their responsibilities seriously. There's very little sign of what you or I would consider, call kind of the traditional sort of political abuse of these kinds of powers. But the potential for this abuse is enormous. I mean, I can just say, imagine if Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover had this technology available to them when they were in office. You can imagine. But this is why it's important for there to continue to be outside monitoring of what's going on in these places.
Well, quite frankly, I've been working in Silicon Valley most of my life. John McAfee was a colleague of mine in the early 1980s when he was developing antiviral software. So I've been tracking these kinds of hacking incidences for longer than I can remember. And I just have to say that when the whole metadata information came out from Edward Snowden, I quite frankly was relieved because it showed a certain amount of government restraint.
Yes.
So I wasn't alarmed. I was relieved. Because metadata is the least of an intrusion that you can actually impose on citizens.
And in fact, the great reform that President Obama put, which was to take the metadata outside of the NSA and store it with the phone companies. And a lot of the Republicans said, this will kill the NSA, this will destroy our intelligence capabilities. Actually, one thing I learned in doing research for the book is that this idea actually came from General Keith Alexander, who was the director of the NSA and the person who kind of he pushed for this metadata program because he realized, it's really not getting us much information. There are other things the NSA does that we're getting enormous information from about terrorism and many other things. The metadata, not so much. And as long as they still have the power to get court orders, to get specific information, you weren't going to lose that much time in doing so. So despite the reforms, or for all the reforms, the abilities, for better or for worse, of what the NSA can do and has been doing have barely been touched at all.
Yes, I agree. Now, I know we only have a few more minutes with you, so let me ask you about the administration's efforts to get companies like Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, and others to work with the government in what I can only call a modern-day version of becoming defense contractors. How's that working so far?
Well, this goes back a long time. I mean, back in the 1920s, a U.S. intelligence agency got Western Union to give them access to all telegraphs going in and out of the country. And, of course, in the 50s and 60s, The FBI and NSA were tapping, ATT was cooperating in letting them wiretap telephones. So actually, what's going on with this fight with Apple? What the FBI is trying to do is to maintain the arrangement that it's had with all of these telecom companies for decades in the face of much stronger encryption. And what the FBI, the whole FBI fight, I mean, what I've come up with is that there really wasn't anything in this guy's phone that they knew about anyway, but the FBI was looking for a new legal precedent which would allow them to maintain this relationship. And the law that they were invoking, one limit of the law from their point of view is that if they could get some other way to break into this phone without getting Apple's permission, then they had to drop the lawsuit. And there was this private firm which came up with a way that they could do it without Apple's cooperation. So the FBI, it looked like a happy solution, but in fact they were a little irritated that this guy came up with an answer, because they thought they wanted to change the law through the courts. They thought that this was a very good case for doing so, and so now they're looking for other cases. But the legality of this is very ambiguous. There's not much case law built on the First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment, privacy laws that don't predate the digital age.
Now, I know that you've got a hard stop here, and we hate to let you go because this, as I said, this is a subject I've been covering for the past 35 years. So it's been a pleasure to have you with us today.
The next big cyber attack, feel free to call me and we'll talk about it.
I have to tell you, this is one of the best researched and most factual books on cyber warfare that has ever been published, and I'm really going to encourage our listeners today to go out and get a copy of it. Thank you for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll be right back after these short messages. You're listening to the Costa Report. Every day our world gets more complicated. Not only is new information coming at us faster than we can manage, new regulations, technology, and the effects of globalization have made it much more difficult to succeed. That's why I wrote The Watchman's Rattle, a book that, for the first time, explains how complexity makes it hard to separate facts from fiction, and eventually causes us to make important decisions based on unproven beliefs. And not just us, our leaders also fall prey to this phenomena. But here's the good news. Once you know the symptoms to watch for, you can safeguard against them. So please, go to RebeccaCosta.com, that's RebeccaCosta.com, and order your copy of The Watchman's Rattle. It only takes a few minutes and the shipping is free. That's RebeccaCosta.com. Do it now. You'll be glad you did.
Big data is being generated by everything around us all the time. Every digital process and social media exchange produce it. Systems, sensors, and mobile devices transmit it. Big data is arriving from multiple sources with ever-increasing velocity, volume, and variety. It's becoming the world's newest resource for competitive advantage, allowing decision-making to move from the elite few to the empowered many. The escalating demand for insights requires a fundamentally new approach to architecture, tools, and practices. To extract meaningful value from big data, you need optimal processing power, analytics capabilities, and skills. Find out how IBM Big Data and Analytics can transform your business. Visit www.ibm.com/bigdata today. That's www.ibm.com/bigdata.
This is Sylvia Panetta inviting you to join us for the Leon Panetta 2016 lecture series. This year we've been discussing An America in Renaissance or Decline, the challenges facing a new president. On May 9, Secretary Panetta will discuss gridlock, partisanship, and executive action with Mark Shields, Chris Matthews, Gloria Borger, and J.C. Watts. Can new leadership bring an end to Washington's partisan gridlock and dysfunction? Join us. Call 831-582-4200.
Care from the Heart is a dedicated and professional home health care agency that's been serving families in the Tri-County Monterey Bay area for over 18 years. We help our clients and their families handle health challenges with determination, love, and humor. When you work with Care from the Heart, we provide assistance with the utmost respect. Your team will consist of nurses, case managers, and home care specialists who will listen, and you will design a flexible program to fit your specific needs, either short-term or long-term. You might need help with medication, personal hygiene, meal preparation, transportation, companionship, household chores, or pet care. We can even help you with the dreaded insurance paperwork. If the time has come when you must step into the role of caregiver for a family member, naturally you'll have questions and concerns. Care from the Heart offers classes that provide specific information and skills you'll need to become the positive and supportive influence your family member deserves. And we protect against caregiver burnout by offering periodic respite care for you. Whatever your individual situation, now or in the future, help is available. For a complimentary consultation, call us at 831-476-8316. We can come to you, or you are welcome to visit our office in Santa Cruz near Dominican Hospital. Our website is carefromtheheart.net.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today was Fred Kaplan, who recently released the book Dark Territory, The Secret History of Cyber War. And unfortunately, he had to leave early. But we book our guests, just so listeners know, we book our guests a full quarter in advance, 3 months in advance. And it was such a coincidence that news of a Romanian hacker that got access to Hillary Clinton's home server broke this week. The timing could not have been better. And I have with us the host of the Charles Friedman Show, Charles Friedman. He's decided to come in a little bit early before our weekly roundtable. Charles, what struck you about this Romanian hacker?
Oh, the name, of course. I mean, here's a guy who calls himself Guccifer.
Guccifer, like Lucifer.
Yeah, well, this is, first of all, we're all familiar with Lucifer, obviously. That's an old scratch. And here we have Gucci. So here we have a very evil person who goes around dressed to the nines and carrying all these wonderful, expensive accessories.
Well, the fact is that he wasn't a government-sponsored hacker.
No,
he was a lone attacker, and he simply used tools that he was able to purchase off the internet. And it's interesting that where he decided to go was he went to Sidney Blumenthal's email account,
right,
which basically gave him a roadmap to everyone who Sidney Blumenthal communicated with. And Sidney communicated to Hillary Clinton's home server. That's what gave him access to the home server.
And from what Guccifer or Guccifer, however you want to pronounce it, from what he has said, he said that what I did here was not out of the ordinary. This was something that any reasonably versant person could have done. And as I listened to Mr. Kaplan make his presentation, I was thinking to myself, he doesn't seem to be very excited about this.
He isn't. He said that it's assumed already that many people got into that home server.
Well, now a couple of weeks ago, was it you had Mike Hayden on your program?
Yep, and he said the same thing.
And he said he would be very shocked to learn that various national capitals were not versant with these emails. I am appalled by this. It points to this utter lack of consideration or consciousness of security on the part of the Secretary of State of the United States at that time, a person who's now putting herself forward for the top office. If you or I had done this, we'd be wearing striped suits.
Well, that is true, except for when you look at the overall picture of how far behind the federal government is in securing its data and communications. It was only last year, I believe, or maybe the year before, but I think it was last year, that Congress approved monies to upgrade old computers that hackers could get into without even thinking about it.
Well,
Some of the computing technology that the federal government is using is so antiquated, a 5-year-old kid could break into them.
Well, we understand that in many cases that's true, although the federal government does have the capacity when it is required to offer state-of-the-art security protections, facilities, etc. One would hope the Secretary of State, who was, after all, supposed to do so under the rules of her own administration, would have availed herself of this. But getting back to your point there and Mr. Kaplan's point, it's always a game of catch-up. Krupp will first invent a great artillery shell that will pierce any armor. Then Krupp will invent armor that will stand up to that shell. So now we have computer people who are doing the same thing. Here is a firewall no one can breach, and here is a way to breach that firewall. This goes on and on. So,
right, it's never ending. You have to upgrade constantly.
I understand that. But nevertheless, we do owe it to ourselves and our national security to do the best we can. I heard Mr. Kaplan kind of saying, well, if somebody wants to hack a system, they're going to hack it. It's kind of like what Secret Service agents will say, well, if somebody really, really wants to assassinate the president, by God, they're probably going to be able to get a shot off at the president. That's no reason not to do our damnedest to protect our president or to protect our secure systems.
Well, that's true, and I don't think he's saying that we don't have to do everything we can, but he does make the point that once you make information accessible to more and more people, like cloud systems do, inherently, from a systemic standpoint, those systems become more vulnerable.
That's
because once you get the the keys to the kingdom, you get it all.
Well, that's certainly true, and there's always this balance. I was interested in hearing Mr. Kaplan point out the people who were first developing the internet say, look, don't harness us with all of this. We're trying to make something work here, and the IT people, or the people who really want to make the internet work as best it can, security systems just get in their way. Get rid of all of this. The problem is, and it's like, the fact that Pandora did open the box and that Eve did bite the apple. There are bad actors out there. Would that there weren't. And wouldn't it be nice if we could simply operate an internet and not have to worry about security measures, not waste any money on it or waste any bandwidth on it or memory capacity, and just let the internet sing its song? But that's not the world we live in.
But I have to tell you, since we're monitoring the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Russians, and they're monitoring us, we're hacking them, they're hacking us, it almost feels like that's the security.
Right.
It's two guys with pointing guns at each other.
Yeah, it's a little black guy and a little white guy, written by Antonio Prohias and appearing monthly in Mad Magazine.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost as though if one of them makes a move, they know that the other's going to retaliate. In some ways, we may have come to a point where we need a Geneva Convention for cyber war on what are the rules of conduct and espionage and, that is allowed. Are you allowed to go in and turn off an entire country's utility system and water system?
Well,
maybe there's going to be there needs to be like Geneva Convention types of rules that lay out what you can and cannot do.
Well, obviously this convention could not be held in Geneva. I would suggest Roswell, New Mexico.
I knew that was coming. All right, that is all the time that we've got this segment, but I know you're going to come back and join me on the roundtable on the second segment. So hang tight and we'll be right back. If your station is leaving us after the first hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Fred Kaplan, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Now that you've heard what the United States government has done to listen in and track the hacking capabilities of foreign governments, the proportional response delivered to North Korea, and the veiled threat of cutting off trade with China, which was delivered by President Obama, do you feel the government is doing enough to protect our data and infrastructure from attack? And are tech firms like Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and Google on the verge of becoming the next modern-day defense contractors? Do they have a role to play in cyber warfare? Based on Apple's recent refusal to work with the FBI to give them access to a single phone, it appears that Silicon Valley wants nothing to do with surveillance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. All you have to do is give me a piece of your mind is go to RebeccaCosta.com and click on the word contact at the menu bar that's at the top of the page. Then type in your remarks in the white comment box that's provided. And if you happen to miss the full interview with Fred Kaplan, remember you can download episodes of the Costa Report from Apple iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, and also our website at RebeccaCosta.com. That's myname.com. My guest next week is the underdog consumer advocate we all came to love in the movie, Erin Brockovich. She'll be here to explain why so many chemicals and devices are being released to the public without thorough testing and the dangers that this presents to unsuspecting consumers like you and me. I have waited a long time to get Erin Brockovich on the program, and I'll tell you, if you saw the movie, you couldn't help but cheer her on. And what's interesting is out of that one case, she has become one of the most vocal consumer advocates in our country today. So I know you're going to want to hear what she's up to lately, including how bad the methane gas leak is in Southern California. Erin Brockovich has a lot of detail that has not been covered by the mainstream media, and we're going to have a chance to dig into that as well. So don't miss Erin Brockovich next week right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for a second hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report.
I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. Dole has a bounty of berries ripe for the picking. Fresh berries are not only delicious, but some of the most powerful disease-fighting foods available. Researchers have found that berries have some of the highest antioxidant levels of any fresh fruits. So add a handful or two of your favorite berries to your next meal and enjoy their nutritional benefits and natural sweetness in all of your dishes, from salads to desserts and everything in between. For fresh tips and ideas from Dole's berry experts, visit berries.dole.com. And be sure to check out the pages of mouth-watering recipes. Whether it's a sweet and savory blueberry cranberry chicken salad or a simple strawberry sorbet, Dole has the perfect berry to inspire your next berrylicious dish.
Hi, Jacoby here, host of Raising the Standards, right here on KFCO Saturdays, 5 p.m. Tune in and join me, Rachel, my co-host, our buddy Rick, and some of the most interesting folks in the world as we chat and play the best music on the planet. Now remember, if at some point during the program you're not offended, well, you're just not listening. Raising the Standards, Saturdays here on KFCO.
Don't miss Raising the Standards with Mike Jacoby, Rick, and Rachel, Saturdays from 5 to 6 p.m.
Join me, Ruth Copland, on Saturday evening, 8 till 9 for It's a Question of Balance, the show where we balance the intellectual with the creative, featuring thought-provoking conversations. Out